Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute-a-day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there friends, welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Come on in here and sit down with me. Get yourself something hot or cold to drink. This is, of course, your 5-minute-a-day, 5-day-a-week studying the Psalms verse by verse podcast. It's right here, Daily Dose Radio. This is the finest 5-minute-a-day studying the Psalms podcast that you're going to find anywhere. Promise you that. As a matter of fact, it comes with a guarantee. There's a money-back guarantee with that as well. So, today we're looking at, all this week, we're looking at Psalm 66. Psalm 66 has a little introduction with it, and I need to address something that I don't know that I have addressed in this version of Daily Dose Radio, and that is that sometimes the introductions contain a portion of the first verse. And what that does is it creates a problem for translators. I don't know why it does, but it apparently it does. Because instead of translating the introduction plus whatever comes afterwards, or translating the introduction as verse 1, they will leave out the introduction and then just translate the part that they consider to be the beginning of the verse, and then you have all kinds of different things that happen. For example, in verse 1 today, you have, "Make a joyful noise unto God, all ye lands." But what comes before that is, "Of the choir master, a song, a psalm," and then you have a break, and then you have verse 1, "Make a joyful noise unto God, all ye lands." Well, a lot of translations will take the end of that introduction, what I've translated here is verse 1, and they will combine it with verse 2. And so then you have everything off by a verse. So then you instead of having 20 verses, you have 19 verses. It just depends on the translation that you use. Some of them will translate the introduction plus the verse, if there's any portion of it that needs to be, translated and placed in the verse. And sometimes they will combine them. Sometimes they'll just not even translate the introduction whatsoever. It's almost like a castaway, which I don't understand that, because the introduction is just as important and is a part of the Hebrew text. So I don't know why we're not translating that, but we're not. Today's psalm, some of you will have 19 verses and some of you will have 20 verses. It just depends on how it's handled. That's all I'm saying. And so when I tell you that verse 1 is, "Make a joyful noise unto God, all ye lands," and you look at your translation and you have, "Make a joyful noise unto God, all ye lands, sing forth the honor of his name, make his praise glorious," as verse 1, I'm going to read that as verse 1 and then verse 2. So when I tell you that, I'm going to do the first 3-4 verses today as the first part of our study in this psalm, then you'll understand that you're going to say, well, wait a minute, the Selah comes at verse 3. It doesn't come in verse 4. So that's just the difference, and it just happens to be the way that it's handled by translators, not always the same. All right, so that being said, we have, this is an orphanic psalm. It's of the choir master, a psalm, a song, a psalm. Now in 65, we had that it was of the choir master of David, a song or a psalm and a song. But this time it's reversed. It's a song, a psalm. This particular psalm is divided by selahs. So we have 3 selahs here. And I'm going to parcel this out into 5 sections, and we're going to have 5 different verses or stanzas. I'm going to treat this like it is a song. The verse 1 is going to cover his glorious name. Verse 2, his glorious works. Verse 3, his glorious discipline. Verse 4, the worshiper's glorious vow. And verse 5, the worshiper's glorious prayer. So we begin with, just like in any good prayer, we begin with glorifying the name of God. and then we find our way through here till we get to, let's say 13 through 20, and we're going to talk about in 13 through 20 how this applies to the worshiper's vow, and the worshiper's prayer. So this is a wonderful song, and you can just imagine the congregation of Israel singing this song as they come to worship. And they have 5 stanzas or 5 verses, however, I don't know, I'm not a musician, so I'm not sure what you call the different, I guess it's verses. You call these different verses in the song. Verse 1 is whatever, and then you go to verse 2. The majority of these are divided by the Selah. I'm going to follow the Selah, except when I come to verses 3 and 4, because in verse 3 I'm going to end that at 12, and verse 4 I'm going to begin it in 13. So there's a difference, but you'll notice that there's a great difference in the language, the voice, because instead of speaking of God's glorious discipline, that ends in 12, and then in 13 we begin with the first person, I will go. So we know that we have a change then in voice, which means that there is a change then in the verse, because we're going to do something different in verse 4 than we did in verse 3. Something different is going to be said. And so you can just imagine that they're singing this, and this would be a great song for us to sing as well. Something that we could sing together, as a congregation. Well, let me just read for you. I'm way past my time today, but let me read for you verses 1 through 4. Make a joyful noise unto God, all ye lands. Sing forth the honor of his name. Make his praise glorious. Say unto God, how terrible art thou in thy works! Through the greatness of thy power shall thine enemies submit themselves unto thee. All the earth shall worship thee, and shall sing unto thee. They shall sing to thy name, Selah. So we have here in verse 1, this is the first verse of our song, a verse about his glorious name. And you'll see that right there in 2, sing forth the honor of his name, make his praise glorious. And then you'll have there in verse 4, they shall sing unto thy name. So his name is mentioned, his glorious name, which is the heartbeat of this psalm, because everything after verse 1 depends on verse 1. So we're going to talk about these 4 verses quite a bit this week as we go through this particular psalm. Unnamed, it's an orphanic psalm, so we don't know who wrote it, but a song for the glorious name of God. Join me tomorrow. We'll look at verse 2 here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.